I hope this isn't too long, but, I've sang plenty of songs, so I guess I earned it. Threshold moments are my favorite thing to sing here at First Church. I get a lot more anxious about singing on Sundays than most people know. The new weeks come really fast, and picking and learning new songs is like a really big turnover. No one sounds their best at 8:30 on a Sunday morning. And I didn't grow up in church, so there are a lot of times when Robin and Zach will be like, oh yeah, you know this hymn, and I really don't. But settling into a threshold moment for a few weeks gives me a chance to grow with the music, to let it settle in my bones, and the format is really meaningful for me. I am a sucker for dramatic underscoring. So a few weeks ago we sang, I'm coming home, and that rang in my head when Zach asked me to come up with a testimony on the idea of pain growing into possibility. Because I live at home. I am 31 years old. I live with my parents. I am in my childhood bedroom. And there are a lot of great things about that, honestly. I get to eat my dad's cooking. My mom and I literally yell, I love you to each other like 10 times a day, just in going around each other in the house. Even when he's cranky, my brother is 6'6" and is great at lifting things. So outside of the financial incentives and puppy snuggles, I truly like my family. I cherish having this time with my parents. They've both survived life-threatening illnesses. But while I know I'm endlessly lucky to have this safety net, so many times in my life, coming home has felt terrible. Coming home has felt like dragging my tail between my legs, and telling the world I'm coming home feels like admitting to another failure. This is my little story. So growing up dramatic, theatrically and otherwise, meant that I felt from a very young age that the only way I would ever succeed would be like to get out of this town. Trademark, all caps, baby musical theater, nerd, fist shaking, like I'll show them. Sincerely, I was a nightmare. I very authentically felt that fame would find me before middle school graduation, and I argued as such when I get in trouble for not doing my homework. But a lot of this intensity and sensitivity had to do with mental health issues that didn't have a name yet. I may not have gotten a record deal by the 7th grade, as I expected, but I did get a therapist, a depression diagnosis, and a prescription for Prozac. The rest of my schooling felt like I was trying to drive a bus while my ambition and my mood disorders brawled in the back seats. Sometimes I excelled in shows and got the grades that matched my intelligence, and other times all the medication and therapy in the world could not get me out of my bed or out of my own way. But if you'll remember, I was going to show them. So I prepared the songs, monologues, essays, dance routines, piano placement tests, and fee waiver applications necessary to audition at nearly a dozen prestigious musical theater colleges. I drove 10 hours to Pittsburgh, 8 to Syracuse, multiple rounds to Boston. I took a bus by myself to New York City, a plane by myself. It was my Christmas gift that year to Michigan. I slept on floors to present my heart and soul to strangers in approximately 1-minute musical form, and I got accepted nowhere. All I wanted was to get to a city, devote myself all day, every day to the arts, and finally make good on this potential I felt was already a decade overdue. Instead, I was headed for a small, religious, liberal arts college 20 minutes from home where I would see my dad literally every day. I was a mess for most of that first year until, like dominoes, over the course of 8 weeks, my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I was accepted to transfer to my dream theater school, and my beloved high school theater teacher, who was like a father to me, passed away unexpectedly. I had no choice in this moment but to choose home. I moved off campus to be with my mother, who is gratefully now 12 years cancer-free. I juggled 2 jobs plus class, and though it was an incredibly painful time, being forced to focus on something bigger than myself opened my eyes to the possibility that my current education could give me. And Holy Cross gave me my first real taste of spirituality, not just obtuse wanting to run away to a convent like in The Sound of Music stuff, but deep investigation and acceptance through traditions like spiritual direction, service, and silent retreat. Yes, me, silent, 5 days. Financially and emotionally, home was again my only choice after college, but I still felt that pull of being too big for my hometown with too many dreams not fulfillable in central Massachusetts. So I moved to Los Angeles in a giant production of Finally Showing Them and an 18-day cross-country road trip. and I lasted in LA for 6 weeks. My anxiety, which had become so much more manageable in the, however boring, routines of the past few years, came roaring back. I was sobbing on bathroom floors, digging my fingers into my palms to stave off dissociation. I drove everywhere in LA in total silence just to give myself a break from sensory overload. I craved home, but I resented myself for it. And yet I wasn't sure if I could recover from this plummet from mental health if I didn't go home. I drove back across the country by myself in 3.5 days. And much to my chagrin, being back in my childhood bedroom didn't feel like relief. It felt like it was taunting me. Only a little longer. Still convinced I couldn't just wither in Rutland, I applied to graduate school and moved to New York City to start my master's. Facing, again, change, loneliness, sensory overload, I started having panic attacks, sometimes calling my mom for help 10 times a day. I rationalized that being closer to home, I could keep a foot in both worlds. But in reality, each bus and train and car ride wiped me out. I didn't know what city my pants were in. I hoped I didn't forget medications on the train. And I was missing out on the chance to fully engage with my classmates and education. I started looking to spirituality again, going on my second silent retreat as an alumni, taking a service trip to Haiti, and looking for a spiritual director in the city. This is where First Church comes in. In my final semester, I came home to sing at one of my best friend's weddings and ended up chatting with the pastor, who suggested that I try Middle Church in Manhattan. When I looked it up, it was 2 blocks from my apartment. I went the very next weekend and found myself in a warm and welcoming congregation, singing Broadway tunes while every single person lingered for hugs during passing of the peace. The pastor immediately zeroed in on social justice and love and called God her. I sat in the pew, frozen to the spot in this profound moment where I realized how many things had to happen for me to be in this place. I had to give up being in a show at grad school to be in Lily's wedding and to hear about this church from Robin. I had to stick it out through high school, which was hard at times, to know Lily at all. I probably wouldn't have had much interest in church if I hadn't gone to Holy Cross. I wouldn't have gone to NYU if I hadn't left Los Angeles. And I wouldn't have been living in this apartment 1/10 of a mile from this church if I hadn't reconnected with my roommate, an acquaintance from high school, on my initial road trip out to LA. I walked up to the Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis after the service, practically speechless, and she just held out her arms to hug me and said, "Welcome home." That's not the end of the story. Obviously, I'm here, and that means I moved back home again. Though the choice was begrudging, as it always had been, I needed to address my mental health better than the patchwork jobs I was doing in between trying to keep up with this timeline I imagined for myself as a 7-year-old Spice Girl wannabe. And then, irony of ironies, a pandemic happened and we were forced to be home for a year. For what it's worth, my incredible care team has helped me work out an amazing mix of medications and therapies, and I am in perhaps the most stable state of mental health I've ever been in. In terms of living at home, my dad made a rainy day full turkey dinner last night, so I am #blessed. I'm not so arrogant as to say that pain is all in God's plan, because I've been through my share of painful things, and that is not what anyone needs to hear in that moment. But what I can say with confidence is that there have been moments, many meaningful, mind-blowing, infuriating moments, where I've seen in hindsight exactly how my pain created possibility. And that doesn't make it not hurt, but it's helped me to learn to soften to it, to hope that when life is ridiculous and incomprehensible, I can laugh and one day understand it. I don't know what home is going to be for now, for later, but letting go a little bit and letting things flow and not giving up when it was a big desire for a really long time has proven to be a really great choice. So I hope, if nothing else, this long and winding road can give you a little insight into, hope and holding on even when it seems really hard. Thank you guys for being a part of my home.